Hello everybody, this is the second class for the ICC course. We're going to see the second chapter titled as Elements of Culture. In this class, we're going to see what elements of a culture are, especially that in the first chapter, we have seen some of the details, brief details about the beliefs, the values, the norms, and social practices. But in this class, we're going to go in deep with so many details regarding these elements. So let's start. So at the beginning, we have to know that the elements of any culture in the world are the same. They are beliefs, values, norms, and social practices. And these four elements share in common some points. So at the beginning, as it's written here, they are dynamic and continuously changing. They can be modified or even discontinued over time. This means that the elements of a culture are not stable, are not applicable in all times. So what was acceptable many years ago will not be acceptable nowadays. You can apply this to any of the elements that we have nowadays or any of the cultural elements that we have nowadays regarding the way that we eat, the way that we dress, the way that we have our social practices. So I'll give you an example. So in the past here in Jordan, it was so necessary to have the traditional dress, whether I'm talking about men or women. So men were dressing something like thob and hatta wigal, for example. And for the women, they were dressing al-madraga. But nowadays, this is not acceptable to see someone who is wearing such clothes here in the streets. But we are looking at these dresses as a part of our traditions or as a part of our history. So, which means that some of the social practices regarding our dress are changing now. So, none of the elements of the culture are stable. All of them are changing over time and they will not continue for many years. The second point is that they are taught to children through interactions over time. This means that the elements of the culture are acquired. They don't come to us innately. So we have to learn them by our parents, by the relatives. So since we were babies or children, our parents taught us many beliefs, norms, and social practices regarding many occasions and regarding many practices in our life, regarding how to behave, how to say something, how to eat, how to behave with somebody, and so and so. So by the end, we say that all these elements are taught to children. We have to teach our children about our culture because culture don't come with the children innately. The third point is that they vary across societies. What is normal in one culture might be depraved in another. So what is acceptable in some societies will not be acceptable in some other societies. I'll give you an example. For instance, here in Jordan, if you have a guest who visits you for the first time and this guest is unknown for you, you don't know him, but he comes to your house. So it is shameful to ask him about the reason why he comes to your home, but after 3 days. So after the third day, you can ask him about the reason why does he come. But this is not necessary in some other countries or in some other cultures in Europe, for example. So if anyone who is a stranger or he is a guest who comes to your house, so you can ask him from the first minute about the reason why does he come to your house. The next one is that differences in cultural elements may lead individuals to cultural shock, bewilderment, and alienation when visiting or living in a new country. By the way, all of these elements, the culture shock, alienation, and bewilderment, will be focused on and will be discussed in details in some coming chapters in this course. So I'll tell you how. So the differences between the cultural elements between one society and another, especially when someone visits another country or when someone's go to live in a new country, these differences between the cultural element will lead this person to a cultural shock or to depression. And this is so normal, especially at the beginning of his visit or at the beginning of the period he lives there, because he used to live something or he used to have something, and now in the new country this thing is not available. So I'll give you just like an example about this. For example, suppose that we have a Jordanian student who used to have a fork and spoon while he is eating his meals. Suppose that he goes to China, for example, or to Japan. So he's going to use the sticks, instead of the spoon. This will be hard for him at the beginning, especially that he is not practicing his fingers to use these sticks. So this may lead him to cultural shock or maybe to depression because of this very simple difference between this culture and that culture. And you can come up with so many examples about the differences between our community and the other communities. All of these differences will lead us to cultural shock, homesickness, or alienation, or depression. The next point is that not all beliefs, values, norms, and social practices passed down to us are entirely correct. This is so perfect. So what was applying, what was acceptable through the days of our grandparents, it's not necessary to be correct nowadays. So this is so clear when we're talking about العادات والتقاليد, especially if these العادات والتقاليد are not acceptable nowadays. So, for example, something regarding the wedding parties. So in the last years, many years ago, for example, for the wedding parties, before the wedding party, before the night of the wedding party, there must be 7 parties, okay, with 7 nights. And they were applying this as a social practice. But nowadays, this is not acceptable, actually, and this is not, or it costs a lot of money, so it will not be acceptable anymore. So it does not mean that if I don't make 7 nights as a party before the wedding party, it doesn't mean that I have a big mistake, because what was acceptable in the past will not be acceptable nowadays. The next point is that beliefs, values, norms, and social practices become social facts and a part of people's lifestyle. And this is so correct. And this is a fact, actually. All values and norms, all social practices that we have, all beliefs that we have in our mind and in our heart will be a part of our lifestyle. So, for example, here in Jordan, the basic meal or the standard meal is the lunch. So we see that if anyone wants to invite somebody to a meal, he will invite him to lunch. And this is a part of our lifestyle, and this is a part of our social practices. Whereas in some European countries, if someone wants to invite somebody to a meal, he will invite him to dinner, but not lunch. So this is a part of their lifestyle, the Europeans. The last point is that beliefs, values, norms, and norms together affect our social practices regarding food, dress, language, art, history, and religious institutions. And this is actually very clear, especially in our countries. So now, when we come to the discussion regarding the beliefs, for example, we will see what is the relation between belief and social practices. For example, we believe that, or it is a part of our Islam religion, that it is so bad to spend a lot of money on parties. Okay, we believe in this. We believe in the idea that it is not good or it's not acceptable by Islam to spend a lot of money on some parties, with wedding parties, for example. And this becomes a part of social practices regarding our occasions. So we find many people nowadays don't spend a lot of money on their wedding parties. Again and again, we believe that it is not acceptable in Islam to have a huge amount of food or a huge amount of meals, so that we will be or we will get them into rubbish. And so this is in Islam, this is in our religious beliefs. So this happened, or this affects on our social practices, so that we find some people, they don't cook a lot or a huge amount of food or meals because of their beliefs. And you have so many other examples. So you have to link the beliefs with the social practices, the values with the social practices, the norms with the social practices. But this will happen after we continue the discussion. So we will go in deep now with every single element. So we will start with beliefs. We will see what is the meaning of belief and some examples. So it is defined, belief, as trusted impression, opinion, idea, feeling, or notion. And its background is one's religious faith or creed. Some of these beliefs are based on science, political theories, philosophy, or even personal experiences. So when we talk about belief, it means that it goes back to our religious faith, or something we believe in science, something we believe in political theories, or something we believe in philosophy or personal experience. We will see an example for each. So an example for the belief that its background is religious faith or creed is, for example, the types of meat we choose to eat, like birds of prey, like falcons and eagles. In Islam, we are not allowed to eat the meat of falcons and eagles, so that it becomes a belief. So we will not find any market, any supermarket in the Jordanian community that will sell you falcons or eagles in order to cook them in with mensaf, for example. Another example is that the way girls dress. Nowadays, we have so many girls in the Jordanian society who wear al-hijab. This is actually a part of our religious faith. To start eating in Ramadan with dates, this is another one. This has a religious faith that depends on the saying of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding the dates, that it has to do with we have to start our meal by having a date, and then well, actually it has a medical basement, but it is mentioned before by some religious creed, so it becomes as a kind of our beliefs. The way we eat, so we have to say Bismillah, then we have to say, to use the right hand and to eat from our side. And this is actually mentioned by Prophet Muhammad when he says, Ya ghulam samillah wa kul biyaminik wa kul mimma yalik. Another belief that we have is rizq ala Allah. So we don't care about if I have a job or don't have a job, because rizq ala Allah. Then an example of a belief that has a scientific background is that we find many people who don't eat fish with yogurt because it may cause us allergy. Political theories, an example of that is elections. So it is a belief in our mind that every parliament, must include one member of every tribe, and this is a belief in our mind. Philosophy, like when we say love is with no eyes, al-hub a'ma. And personal experience, when we don't trust strangers because of a bad experience that I have, so I will not. So the result is that I will not trust any stranger anymore. We will move now to the values, the second element of a culture. So we will see what is the meaning of a value with some examples, and we will see what is the meaning of values are universal or not universal, like they are particular. And yes, so we will see what is the meaning of values. So it is defined as the ideas that a culture consider as important. These ideas are seated and acquired during childhood by formal or informal education at schools or by settings with adults, like when we say al-majalis, madaris, and during the observations of other people like parents, teachers, religious leaders, and public figures. So the values means that the ideas that we believe in, but they are not a part of our religion, but they depend on some experiences of others or some educational background and so. Like a good example for that is the hospitality, honesty, bravery, helping strangers to judge between fighters to end the problem. Like when we say in Jordanian community, فكاكين النشب. So this is a part of our values. So if you find two people who are fighting with each other, so it is a must by some other people to end this problem. This is a part of our values. It is so necessary to be honest with others and brave in some situations. It's so necessary to be generous with our guests. It's so important to help strangers. So every culture is proud of its values and celebrate them in songs, art, and literature. So that we find many songs in Jordanian culture, for example, who are talking about the hospitality of the Jordanian people or the bravery of the Jordanian people. Okay. Values are universal or peculiar. Some values are universal, shared by all countries in the world, while others are not universal. For example, to have a good health and hygiene and self-reliance are universal values. No community in the world denies that having a good health is not a value. It is a value. It is a value in all countries in the world that hygiene is a must. It is like perfect to think in the way in all countries in the world that self-alliance is a good value. Whereas in some communities, like the Arab ones, the priority is given more to respect the elders and religious faith than to something else. So it's not necessary to be applied in some other countries. We will see this in the coming, or we will see this in some other examples regarding the norms. We will move now to the norms. It is defined as unwritten rules that govern appropriate behavior within a specific context within a culture. They are long adopted practices, tell us what is expected and acceptable in a given situation. So we've learned from our parents and relatives that is لكل مقام مقال. So what is acceptable in some occasions will not be acceptable in some other occasions. And we can measure this on all parts of our life. We will see how. They govern how people talk, eat, dress, and interact with others in private and public spaces. So the way that I eat my meal at home will be almost different from the way that I eat at restaurants. And this is a part of our norms. It is not written, it is not said in schools or in educational books, but it is learned from our parents. The way that I dress, for example, I have to dress black dresses while I am in a death situation, but it is good to dress, for example, or to wear some colorful dresses while I am in a wedding party, and so and so. We will get some examples here regarding the norms. The first one is offering your seat in a bus to an old man. This is a part of our norms in the Jordanian society. So if I find an old man or a religious man or a girl, so I have to give her the priority to sit in, or to give her or to give him my seat in the bus. This is almost different actually from this one. I mean, from this example that I've mentioned regarding the values. Now, I give this example just to say that for the universal values or non-universal values, this is to give the priority. Now, if I say that it is a must for me, it is a must, okay, for me to give the priority in the bus for an elder man. So this is just in my mind, but it's not necessary to apply this. Once I apply it, so it is a norm. You get the difference? The second example is that wearing suitable dress in religious duties versus in weddings. If I go to the mosque or if I go to the church, so my dress will be almost different from if I go to a wedding. My dress at the university or at school will be almost different as well. This is a part of our norms. Present adults to talk, not the children. So I have to listen. Okay, when I go with my child in an occasion, so I have to teach my child that you have to give me the priority to talk. You don't have to interrupt me while I'm talking. Given a big value to girls when getting married through al-jaha. So al-jaha and some other activities or practices that we have are part of our norms. So كتب الكتاب is a kind of, it is not a norm, it is a faith, a belief. So it is a must regarding our Islam religion. But the other activities that we have like al-jaha and حفل الوداع وحفل الحنة and so on, all of them are part of norms in the Jordanian society. Drive in a safe manner and with no noise. I don't have to bother my neighbors. I don't have to bother the people in the streets. This is a part of our norms. And this is actually a part of the law. So if I have such a mistake, if I bother the others, I may pay a fine. Shaking the cup of coffee, this is a part of our norms here in the Jordanian society and in the Bedouin societies. That if I shake the cup of coffee, it means that I am satisfied with coffee. I don't need some more. Okay. How do cultures with its elements change? It is necessary to get this idea. How do cultures change? So we've mentioned before that every community or every culture is or has its own elements. So by the end, we have different cultures. And because of that, once somebody go to live in a new country or to study in a new country, he will face cultural shock. This cultural shock happened because of the changes between these cultures. So we will see, how do cultures change? Once individuals in the society encounter different perspectives through education, cultural exchange, social media, and internet, they encourage their communities to construct social and cultural elements and to let go of those social practices that harm their societies. As they weigh the pros and cons of certain practices, they can change their culture in positive ways over time. I'll explain this in some simple words. So because of the social media, because of traveling, because of the exchange, because of trade, because of education when someone goes to study abroad. So what will happen is the following. Suppose that I go to one of the European countries. So I see some social practices. And I find this social practice is much better in some occasions, is much better than some of the social practices in Jordan. So I will get this social practice and try to apply it in my country. Okay, so by the end, when I have more than one value or more than one norm, more than one social practice that change from, in the Jordanian society, for example, from one time to another, it means that the cultures will change. So suppose I find when I go to Japan, for example, I find people, they don't cook, for example, a huge amount of food or a huge amount of dishes in celebrations or in some occasions. So I am admired by this social practice, and I will get it to my Jordanian society. This is perfect. I find it perfect, and I get it to my to my society in order for my society to be much perfect. This is the meaning of how do cultures change. So this Jordanian culture, for example, has its own elements, but because of the social media and because of the cultural exchange or education, it starts to be changed. These elements start to be changed because الثقافات دخلت في بعضها. It's necessary when we're talking about the elements of culture to see what is the meaning of minorities and what is the meaning of races in societies. Minorities simply are a group of people who, because of some reasons, change their countries or they travel from their country to another. Like when we were talking about refugees, who are whatever the refugees are. So once we're talking about, for example, the people who travel from Syria through the Syrian war to Europe. Okay, so in Germany we find some minorities of Syrian there, أقليات سورية, for example. And another example is those people who leave their towns, they travel from one city to another city within the same country because of a crime. And this is called الجلوة العشائرية. So, for example, a group of people leaves, for example, Jerash, and they go to Irbid. So this group of people who leave Jerash will be a minority in Irbid. Okay. The races in societies, it means people who are believed to belong to the same genetic stock. They also have specific norms that differ from the norms or the elements of the culture from the elements of the culture of the society they live in. A good example for that is the Shishan Sharkas. This group of people are, they have their own cultural elements, which are sometimes different from the Jordanian society. They are a part of the Jordanian society, but they have their own elements. The last element that we are going to say is social practices. So what is social practice? It means the commonplace, predictable behavior of individuals who live within a specific culture. They are shaped by the culture's beliefs, values, and norms. Actually, when we say social practice, it means that it is a result of all beliefs, norms, and values that we have. And these practices will happen to every part of our life. It will happen to the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we have occasions, and the way we behave in some occasions. Social practices can be formal or informal. It could be formal, governing specific public rituals and ceremonies. Example, in wedding celebrations, mensaf must be the food and knafe must be the sweet. This is a must. This is a must social practice. Informal one, governing everyday life activities like eating, sleeping, dressing, working, and playing together. For example, lunch in Jordan is the main meal, and it could take place between 2 up to 6 p.m. This is the time for lunch. You can explore the social practices regarding something regarding food, dress, and so on. So, for example, if you want to think about the social practices regarding food as a kind of or as a part of our culture, so we have to think about these questions: what we eat, Okay, I mean the ingredients. So why do we have laban jamid, for example? This is a part of our culture. Why do we have this kind of meat, not that kind of meat? What kind of, for example, the bread that we have? Why do we have shrak or الخبز المشروح and so on? This is a part of our culture. This is a part of our social practices regarding some celebrations. Then when to eat. It is a part of our culture. How to eat, by hand or by spoon and fork or by sticks. We have to think in this way. So we have to say the tools that we use to describe. With whom to eat? Is it fine to eat as alone, or it is a must to eat with our families, big families, or what? How food to be a part of social celebrations? Is food a part of social celebrations in weddings or in death situations, or it is not? We have to apply this in the Jordanian society. What beliefs about food exist in any culture? For example, to start eating with dates in Ramadan, birds of prey are not allowed to be eaten. So all of these are part of social practices regarding food. We have to think in the conversations that we may have while eating. Is it fine to talk about something something regarding national geographic, like if we're talking about snakes or crocodiles, is it fine to talk about insects while we are eating, or it's not allowed, or it's not acceptable? So we have to think about all of these questions once we want to apply the social practices or to talk about the social practices regarding food. Think about the social practices regarding a dress. For example, what a dress we have to wear in some occasions or in some celebrations. Then we have to think, yes, in the way that, for example, what is the impression of hijab in the European countries? Or, for example, what is the meaning of when someone wears shimar, okay, بالمقلوب, okay? So, does it have any meaning? Is it a part of our Jordanian culture or not? We have to think in these ways. Marriage, we have to think about some social practices regarding our culture, like, for example, whose responsibility to find a bride for a man who wants to get married? Is it necessary for his mother to find this bride, or it is his job? Signing the marriage contract. Some families invite the official to come to the house for the bride and the groom sign, whereas some others go to the court to sign. And beside that, we have some many practices regarding عقد الزواج. So some people or كتب الكتاب try to have كتب الكتاب through the engagement, or in some people through the wedding party. We have to think about the clothes in some occasions and the food served there. Okay, here actually we have some pictures regarding the dress that some people have when they have their weddings. So this is al-Gaftan, for example, and it is used in Morocco, and it is almost different from this one, the white dress, and it is also different from this. I think this is in Algeria or something like that. So this is the end of this class. I will see you next time. Goodbye.